Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Super pumped up to get my first mock draft. I obviously waited a lot longer this year. I personally think mock drafts, they are fun, but they're kind of irrelevant until you get to this time of year when you really start to see how the teams around the league fill out their rosters, what certain teams do, how it projects, how things will go in the first round. And as a Giants fan, the first round, of course, is going to set up everything else. I plan on doing probably one of these a week, talking about various scenarios that I could see the New York Giants going through. But as of today, this first mock draft, and I'm only going to do the first four picks. I didn't do pick, I think we're like 170 and 190. I did the first four picks. We'll talk about some deep sleepers probably in another video. But this mock draft is what I feel, as of today at least, is likely. Now, of course, after you get out of round one, it's like a crapshoot. You just go off of patterns and you project team need, best available player that'll be at that pick. Last year, I hit on Deonte Banks. I know that. I had him before the draft started. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But it's just fun to go over some of the scenarios, talk about some of the various things that the New York Giants may be presented with throughout the course of this year's draft. Before we dive into the draft, let's quickly recap, like I did in my last video, what the New York Giants did in free agency. They clearly focused heavily on the offensive line, which leads me to believe we're probably not taking an offensive lineman early in this year's draft. Do I think we could with one of those later picks that I talked about that I won't be mocking here? Absolutely. You can never have enough good offensive linemen. Wouldn't be stunned at all if we take a lineman in round 4, round 5. Same thing with the quarterback. If they don't go with a quarterback early, that could be a target there late day 2, early day 3. Same thing with the running back position. Like, there's a lot of options. Of course, we could go quarterback, which I will do in another mock draft. Rest easy, guys, for the quarterback people, or quarterback no matter what people. I know that that's clearly a possibility. Today, J.J. McCarthy, or a few days ago, whatever it was, it came out today, J.J. McCarthy wined and dined with the New York Giants. Is that smoke? Is there interest? We'll find out. But in this mock draft, I'm going to tell you how I truly feel today. And how I truly feel today is it is much more likely, in my opinion, that the New York Giants are going with a wide receiver with their pick. And I've heard rumors. I've talked to people. Patricia's told me she thinks there's a good chance they're going quarterback. I believe what I believe. And I see what the New York Giants did in free agency. I look at it. I think they're setting themselves up to take one of the best available players in this year's draft. And in my opinion, where we're picking, I don't think, as I've said continuous times, we're not going to be able to trade up into that top 3. I don't think Joe Shane's going to take J.J. McCarthy. He could, and I will certainly have it mocked in a future mock draft. But in this video, we're going to do what I think is going to go down as of today for the New York Giants. Before we get into our first pick, I'm going to tell you why I had him falling to the Giants, because I think it is very likely. The Minnesota Vikings, of course, traded up about a week ago. They got pick number 23. I think it was from the Houston Texans. Why do you do that? Like, some people may say, well, they just want to get another first-round pick. But why would you blindly trade up to get the 23rd pick when you have no idea who's going to be available there, right? 22 players go before that pick. You have no idea who's going to be there. It's not like you're trading up to pick 3 or 4 where you have a general consensus and general idea who's going to be available with that pick. It is as clear as day that the Minnesota Vikings traded up to 23, being that they let Kirk Cousins go, being that they clearly need a quarterback. They planned to trade up for a quarterback, and you don't blindly make a move like that without knowing who's going to be available at 23, unless there's a very good indication from another team, a potential trade partner, that you're going to be able to trade up. So as soon as they made that trade, in my head, I think the Minnesota Vikings are going quarterback, and I think they're going to trade up into the top 6 to do it. I did a video, or top 7 perhaps, who knows? But I did a video on this about 2 or 3 years ago. Go back and check it out if you want to, and I'm not going to link it in the description, but go back. If you're a long-time subscriber of mine, you probably remember it, where I talked about, historically speaking, the value in a trade-up scenario where you trade up for a quarterback on the points chart. And I looked over every major trade, whether it was Josh Allen, whether it was Sam Darnold, and almost the average premium that you had to pay was 25%. When I say that, tack on 25% to what the points say. So the Giants' points right now are 1,600. You tack on 25% to that. 25% of 1,600 brings you to 2,000. The Vikings' points, pick number 13, I think it is, where they're picking, or 11, I should say. Pick 11 is worth 1,250. Pick 23 is worth 760. The points add up with the 25% premium. That's 2,010 points. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be with the Giants, but I'm certainly not ruling it out. I could definitely foresee a scenario if the Giants have, say, Neighbors and have, say, Marvin Harrison off the board. Maybe they don't quite feel as highly about a guy like a Dunze. They don't want McCarthy. The Vikings clearly do. They could move up and make that move. They could certainly do it with the Chargers. They could do it with the Cardinals, although I think that's less likely. They've bought into Kyler Murray. They have no wide receivers. You're staring at Marvin Harrison Jr. So I don't see that happening. But I think the trade partner for the Vikings, and I think there's a trade partner, because I don't think they make that trade unless they strongly believe that there is the Chargers or the Giants. That's what I believe going into this draft. A lot of people seem to think we're going quarterback now. I am of the belief, not ruling out the possibility of a quarterback, but I am of the belief that the New York Giants want the Vikings to move up and get a quarterback for this precise reason. My first pick in my first mock draft is a guy who I don't think should drop to 6. If you go to the mock draft database, most of them have him going with the 5th pick. Obviously, to the Chargers. The Chargers let go of their 2 best wide receivers. Makes all the sense in the world. And if the Vikings don't trade up, good chance that's exactly what's going to happen if they don't trade up ahead of us. He's going to be off the board, and then you're probably looking at Rome Odunze. But in this mock, my first mock, I had the Vikings trading up for J.J. McCarthy, and I had Malik Neighbors, who many feel might be one of the top 2 or 3 overall prospects in this entire draft, drop to the New York Giants. And I would be thrilled if this would happen. I know a lot of fans would be disappointed because they want a quarterback. I get it. Daniel Jones hasn't been able to stay on the field. He hasn't been super productive over the course of his career outside of, 2 years ago. I get it. You want to restart. I understand it. But to me, this would be a gift to be able to get a guy like Malik Neighbors, who should be a top 2 or 3 pick. That's how good this guy is. He would be the top wide receiver in almost any draft class. He just so happens to be sharing a draft class with Marvin Harrison Jr. And now you've started to see several people start to say that they're 1A and 1B. They think that you can't really distinguish them. And I certainly see the argument for Neighbors in terms of being a better fit in the modern day NFL. Malik Neighbors is Jalen Waddle with 3 more inches and a lot more big playability in open space in terms of being able to break tackles, take a slant to the house. Like, this guy is a monster. He's 6 foot. He's just over 200 pounds. He is as explosive as they come. He's versatile, which is what you want in today's modern day NFL, right? You think about Odell Beckham, who ironically came from the same school as Malik Neighbors. He could move all over. He could play in the slot. He could play on in the outside. Could take make a big play out of nothing. That's what Neighbors brings to the table for this New York Giants offense. Now, I'm not telling you he's going to be Odell Beckham, but I'm telling you he's going to be the closest thing since Odell Beckham if you bring him in here and put him in a New York Giants uniform. There's no doubt in my mind. He is going to be a premium piece for this offense for a very long time. And suddenly, you look at that wide receiving core long term. If you were to bring in Neighbors, you say, wow, you got him. You got Wan'Dale, young, versatile. You got, obviously, Jalen Hyatt. Like, you got speed all over. You got guys that could do different kinds of things. Darius Slayton. And I am pumped up about the future of this offense if you bring in a guy like Malik Neighbors. It's clearly been one of the biggest missing pieces for this offense for a very long time. Haven't been able to replace Odell Beckham since we traded him. Malik Neighbors is able to do that. There's other routes that some people may argue. You want to trade down. You want to go Joe Alt. I don't think many Giants fans are arguing that at this point, after we added a lot of help on the offensive line in free agency. But I'm sure there's still some out there that may want to go with the line there. And I get it, even though a lot of fans poo-poo that. I don't. I wouldn't scream if they did it. Clearly not my preference. I want the Giants to go to the strength of the draft. That is always what I want more often than not. If the strength of the draft is a premium position, which wide receiver is, I wouldn't say it is the biggest, most premium position, but it's one of the 4 or 5 most important positions on a football team. It's a clear need of ours. We didn't address it at all in free agency. All of this tells me where we're picking, it just makes the most sense if we're unable to trade up for a quarterback that the Giants end up with Malik Neighbors. Now, if it's not Neighbors, it would be a Dunze, right? I would go with a Dunze if we weren't trading down and Neighbors and Harrison were already off the board and McCarthy, if the Vikings didn't trade up for McCarthy, I would go with a Dunze. But I got to think Minnesota's trading up, but don't rule it out that it could be the New York Giants. And I will talk about what I would do in that scenario in a future mock draft, because I do think that's a possibility as well, that the Vikings trade up and we get picks 11 and 23. So that'll be another fun mock draft for sure to go over. But here, we're going to get Malik Neighbors. That brings us to the second round. Now, before we go over what I elected to do in the second round, I like to look at patterns. You look at Bowen, the new defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. Let's look at what he did with the Tennessee Titans while he was over there with Mike Vrabel. What did they do? How did they draft? How did they try to build their defense? Because obviously, he's going to try to bring that over here. He's going to have a similar defensive philosophy. You think about some of the similarities with that defense. They obviously had one of the best D tackles in football. Same thing here with Dexter Lawrence. We've tried to improve the pass rush because I think Bowen is going to rely strongly on that defensive line, as I expected, as many Giants fans expected. They were going to try and go out and get another edge rusher opposite Kayvon Thibodeau. That's exactly what they did. But what has Tennessee done in recent drafts? Well, Bowen was the DC. Well, last year, nothing to speak of, right? They didn't draft a single defensive player. 2022, his second year as the DC there. He's been the DC there for 3 years, was a defensive coach, I think, for 2 or 3 years before that as well. But in 2022, first defensive player off the board, Roger McCreary, cornerback. After that, second defensive player off the board in that draft, Theo Jackson, DB. 2021, first player off the board, first player that they drafted, cornerback, Caleb Farley. You go back to 2020, the year before. Who did they take? They took Christian Fulton. Ding, 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 another cornerback. So I think, and it may not be corner, it may be safety, but I think this round for the New York Giants, they are going to address the secondary. They have to. You lost Xavier McKinney. You're going to lose Adoree Jackson. I understand you're bringing in Tre'Davious White, but you got to try to get some more young, talented players in that secondary. I understand we drafted Deonte Banks last year, but we also saw the writing on the wall. We knew Adoree was going to leave. We need more talent in that secondary. And I know that there's some other players, obviously Cordell Flott. He may grow into be something. Dane Belton could be a nice piece long-term. Pinnock's a nice piece. But the Giants have got to go out there, and they got to try to add another piece to that secondary. As a matter of fact, in this mock draft, they're going to be adding 2 because I think that's going to be a point of emphasis in this year's draft. That's my honest opinion going in. I think you'll see at least a safety and a corner drafted within the first 4 rounds of this year's draft for the New York Giants. And here, I'm going to have them taken who many feel is the best safety in this year's draft class. It was him. It was a couple of other guys I was thinking about here, a couple of corners as well that I'll probably mix in a future mock draft. But here, I'm going to go Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. This dude is huge for a safety. Probably projects to be more of an in-the-box guy, not a natural replacement for a guy like an Xavier McKinney, not the same skill set, but it's also not the same defense. Nubin, 6'2", 210. He had 13 interceptions while at Minnesota, all of which came in the last 3 years. He had 5 interceptions last year, so he clearly has some coverage skills. He is a hard hitter when you watch his highlights. He's very good against the run. I think he played. I saw the numbers. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I think he played almost equal he played a lot in the box, and a lot of people project him to be more of an in-the-box safety at the NFL level. Think more of a Landon Collins type player, but I think a really good talent, and I think a really good pick here for the New York Giants. And I tried to be realistic with these picks. He was the 43rd over. When you go to this is a website that actually takes all the averages of all the mock drafts and where they're going. On average, he's going 43rd. Giants are picking 47. It makes sense. We need a safety. I went over the history of Bowen. I think we're going secondary here. It could certainly be corner, but I think Nubin makes a lot of sense for the New York Giants. A lot of people are going to say, Chris, why didn't you take Penix, or why didn't you take a quarterback here, Bo Nix, whoever, if they were to fall to the second round? I look at what the Giants did in the trade for Brian Burns, and I think by trading pick 39, it's clear if they're not they may go quarterback in the first, which I will do in a future mock draft. But if they're not going quarterback in the first, I don't see a heavy emphasis to take a quarterback in the second round. Otherwise, you would have kept that 39th pick, no? You would think. So I don't see a heavy emphasis because you would have had the ability to potentially trade back up into the first had you done that. I mean, it's possible. But the way I see it, I think we're going secondary here with that second round pick. Next up, this is a player I really like, and I've looked into him a bit. Sorry about that. Mike went out for a second. We'll switch to the crappy mic midstream. Sorry about that. We don't do a lot of editing on this channel. But the Giants actually showed a lot of interest in this player They went to the Senior Bowl. He got rave reviews at the Senior Bowl. Giants brought him in for a top 30 visit. Has ties to New York, grew up in Brooklyn. The Giants, I think, are going to continue to try to improve that defensive line. Adisa Isaac, check him out. I'm sure a lot of Giants fans probably already have, being that we brought him in for a top 30 visit, being that he's out of New York. He was the number one player coming out of high school, out of the state of New York, coming out of Brooklyn in 2019. He ranked 66 nationally overall. And the player that he reminds me of is a guy that I wanted in free agency, and that's Bryce Huff. He's a bit undersized. I think he's 6'4", 249, a bit undersized, but he projects to be a pure pass rusher, a situational pass rusher. And maybe he's not going to be that, Brian Burns or Kayvon Thibodeau, but I think he's a guy that could really come in and help the pass rush and could project to be what Huff was for the Jets. That's what he was there. He's looking to expand his horizon and get more of an expanded role somewhere else. But that's what I think and could see a guy like Isaac potentially being for the New York Giants. And with this new defensive scheme, I got to think that's what we're looking to do. Add as many good pass rushers as you can. Azeez Ojulari is only going to be here probably for another year. He kind of fills that void long term here in the third round for the New York Giants. And once again, similar range, right? On average, he's going 75th. Giants have the 70th pick. I think it's a good fit. This next pick, and this will be my final pick in this mock draft. Like I said, I will do a deep sleeper mock. I will do several other mock drafts, but this will be my last pick in this mock draft. This is a player I really like, and he kind of fits the mold when I did some research on him, and that's Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest. The Giants have the 107th pick. His overall rank is 106. His player comp, if you go on NFL.com, is Christian Fulton, drafted by Bowen and the Tennessee Titans. He's a man press cover corner. He's thought to be one of the best man press cover corners in this year's draft class. He's probably not going to be a starter. Obviously, he's projected to go in the fourth round, but he could be a guy that develops into a starter long term, and he just seems like he would be the type of corner that the New York Giants would covet. I still think the New York Giants are going to add a veteran corner at some point in this secondary, but I think Carson could project to potentially be a starter long-term. And he's young. He's got potential. He's got upside. He actually had a very strong, they say everything I've read on him, his athletic traits are above his game tape. So he's still got some catching up to do, but maybe with the proper coaching, he could reach his ceiling. But these four players, I think, make a lot of sense. In this scenario, you get your premium wide receiver, you get a nice situational edge, and you add two nice pieces to the secondary. And going into the draft, when you look at the needs coming out of free agency, I think that's what you're looking at. Secondary, playmaker, potentially a quarterback, and maybe late offensive line help. Other scenarios I thought about here was defensive line. In terms of the interior, I could certainly see them doing that as well. I know Fisk is a really popular player. I'll probably have him mocked in another draft as well. But this, to me, right now, I think is a fairly realistic scenario for the New York Giants in the first four rounds of this year's draft. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Who do you guys have? You got McCarthy? Who do you got? You guys let me know in the comments below who you got the New York Giants selecting in this year's draft. As always, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up.